We are so back. The last time I was sitting down to film a YouTube video with my phone horizontally was 2 years ago. My hair was long and I didn't have bangs. So long story short, which is the only time I'm going to say that, we had a lot of catching up to do. The last video I made was about how I knew it was time to break up with my previous partner. If you haven't watched that yet, go back and watch that to get all the context for this video and videos to come. I'm gonna give you a little recap of the breakup itself, but then we're gonna get into tips and things that I did to get over that breakup. Because although I have gone through many a breakup before, that one was definitely my first like real adult relationship. Now, if you've been following me on other platforms, specifically on TikTok, you'll have seen this journey in real time, but there are still a lot of things that I didn't share on TikTok, and now I'm not limited to like 60 seconds in order to tell you my true thoughts. And if you have previously been on this platform and you know that I come and I disappear again, this time is different. This time, I've already planned at least 13 videos in advance, so it's time to get sat because I'm about to give you debrief after debrief after debrief. There also appears to be some sort of construction above me, so if you can hear that, no, you can't. Now let's rewind 2 years ago and give you a recap. I was dating my previous partner for 3 years and living with him for 1 year. Not only was that my first time living with a partner, but it was also my first time living away from home, so there was just a lot of new, uncharted territory when it came to that breakup. The reasons we broke up were basically incompatibility. We had very different views of life, how we wanted to live our lives, and ultimately when I started to picture the life that I wanted to live, he did not fit into it, and I'm sure I didn't fit into his perfect version of a life either. But I think what always makes healthy relationships so tough is that nobody was wronging the other person, nobody was mistreating the other person. So at the end of the day, we still really respected each other, we had a lot of love for each other, we were good at communicating with one another. We were just trying to put two puzzle pieces together and they weren't fitting. Let's actually quickly debrief the breakup specifically. What happened was, at the time, I was going through a really bad mental health spiral. I was burning out at work. I was suffering from the most intense anxiety I have ever felt in my entire life. We'll definitely deep dive into that in a separate video because I could talk for days. And leading up to that, we had already kind of identified a lot of problems in our relationship, but I do think the way that I didn't feel as supported as I really needed to feel during that mental health spiral was the nail in the coffin, and what ultimately led me to be like, listen, I can't do this anymore. And so I definitely made that decision a couple weeks before we actually broke up, but I had a trip lined up. Also, if I remember correctly, I was like on my period at the time, so I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't a hormonal decision and that I had time to really digest, because like I said, we had dated for 3 years. I wanted to give it the time and thought that the relationship deserved and that he deserved. So I went on this trip. I was trying to enjoy it with my girlfriends. I talked about it a little bit with them, but for the most part, I was really trying to come to that decision on my own. And I remember before I got on the plane coming home, I texted him being like, listen, I've thought a lot about a relationship and I do really want to have a conversation immediately when I come home. I don't know if that was the best way forward. There's really no best way forward when it comes to breaking up with someone. I know it probably sent him into like a bit of an anxious spiral for the X amount of hours that I was on a plane and unreachable, but I think I needed to do that to hold myself accountable to have that conversation. And I also knew that when I came home, it was going to be this big like embrace, I miss you so much, and I knew it would be harder for me to like segue into being like, you need to sit down for this one, you know what I mean? This is also really fun recounting this experience 2 years later because I can now look at it very objectively and I don't have a lot of emotion around it. But if there's one thing I do have, it's memory, okay? So I can recount step by step, word by word what happened. Anyways, I come home, I'm so anxious, I don't want to have this conversation and I'm super tired from traveling, but I know I need to do it that night because I just can't pretend like everything's fine for another minute. And one thing about me is I had only initiated a breakup one other time before, maybe twice. I don't know, it's hard to say, sometimes they're murky. So in general, I would consider myself still a newbie in terms of having that conversation, and I really don't like confrontation and conflict, so it took a lot out of me to be like, this isn't working. And when we had the conversation, it was really emotional. I felt so guilty and it felt like such a loss because we had invested so much into the relationship and made so many strides in the relationship. So trying to tell him that at the end of all that, I still didn't feel confident about the relationship was really hard to articulate. He did try to fight for the relationship, which I expected him to. He was very much so in the line of we could work on it. There are still steps we haven't taken. But ultimately what it boiled down to was there were so many things that it doesn't matter how often we talk about it. It doesn't matter if we go to therapy to talk about it. Those things are not going to change. And that was a lot of our views, our opinions, the way that we wanted to live our lives, whether we wanted kids or not. Like, therapy is not gonna fix that, you know what I mean? And ultimately he agreed with that. Like, he knew there were things that no amount of love and care in the world was going to change that, and they were really important things. Once the breakup was over, like I said, we lived together, and I wasn't immediately gonna be like, all right, pack your bags. get out of here, because he didn't have family here. There was nowhere for him to go, and I'm not the devil. Plus, I still cared about him. I still respected him. You can stay. And it wasn't just for that one night that he stayed. He stayed for, I think, 3 weeks after our breakup. And some people would say that's crazy. How can you live with your ex? For us, I think it actually worked really well, because without the pressure of being in a romantic relationship, we could kind of revert back to just being friends and just having normal banter and conversation, because we originally started as friends before we got into a relationship. So it felt really natural not having that romantic tie and just kind of like shooting the shit. Plus, I feel like what you normally lack in a breakup is you end up having the breakup and then you go radio silent and you don't talk to each other again. But oftentimes, if you're anything like me, you have more things you want to say, more questions you want to ask, more things that you could have closure on. And so having him in the same vicinity allowed for future conversations. Not to say that we were having any conversations to try and revert back to being together, but at least we could talk a little bit more candidly about our experience in our relationship and just like how we were feeling, which I think was also helpful, because I don't know about you, but after a breakup, the last thing I want to do is go tell my friends about it, but I still want to be talking about it to somebody. So this was like the best of both worlds. I didn't have to go tell my friends right away, but I could still talk to somebody about it, and somebody who truly understood, because he was in it. And then within that 3 weeks, I think he had decided he was going to move back home. And so we actually had like a last hangout with my friends and a last dinner with my family, because he was very much integrated in my friend group and also in my family circle. And I feel like that's relatively rare from what I've heard. Like, you don't normally have a goodbye meal or a goodbye party for somebody's ex. So it was a really cool and fun experience, and I feel really lucky that we were able to end our relationship on such a high note and in such a celebratory way. This is not me saying you should live with your ex after a breakup. Don't get it twisted. That's just what we did, and it happened to work for us. The caveat with that is that I feel like I had to go through the breakup twice. The first time when we had the conversation, and the second time when he officially moved out. I almost think that second time was harder, and that was when I was going online and crying on the internet. If you were around for that situation, no you weren't. I don't go back and watch those videos ever, but I also know that a lot of people found comfort and a lot of people found my socials because of those videos. But I also got a lot of hate for crying online, okay? Sorry for sharing my feelings. Anyways, I remember coming home after saying our final goodbyes and dropping him off at the airport and thinking, wow, this is real. Like, we are alone now. And like I said at the beginning, this was my first time living outside of my family home. So I was truly, truly alone. And I'm telling you right now, it hit me like a truck. I was so emotional. I was a wreck. I didn't get out of bed for what felt like days. I took to the internet, okay, which I will also say is what made it so difficult. Was this is my first public relationship and therefore public breakup. I didn't know how to navigate it and share my authentic feelings without oversharing. So I was just like doing what felt right for me at the time. And I think I just felt so lonely. It felt good to share it online and relate to people and have conversations with people who were going through the same thing. But damn, I was down bad. I feel like that second breakup really fucked me up. That is the one downfall of having your ex stay in your house after you have the breakup. You're literally breaking up twice. That's my long-winded recap of the breakup itself and how I was feeling. Now let's get into what I think actually helped me get through the breakup. And I say through intentionally, which we will get to. The first thing that I think is so important after a breakup is you have to stop talking to them. Once my ex moved out, we essentially stopped talking because he was on the other side of the world. There was no reason for us to talk. There was no reason for us to continue being friends. I think maybe at the end of our breakup, we said we were gonna continue being friends, but honestly, at my big age, I don't need more friends. He wasn't gonna be in the same city, and ultimately it wasn't going to help our healing to be in contact and still be relying on one another, which I think is the biggest thing about going no contact, is you are essentially training yourself to not depend on the security blanket and the comfort that that person gives you. The same thing is true about stalking them online, okay? Honestly, if you can unfollow, if you can block them, just for your peace of mind, not because you have any ill intent or any ill feelings towards them, it will save you a lot of heartache, trust me. This might be a bad analogy, but you know those parents that just like toss their baby into a pool to teach them how to swim? That's essentially what you're doing here. You're cutting yourself off cold turkey, which feels really uncomfortable and jarring, but you're doing it to expedite that healing process because you are essentially telling your brain and telling yourself, I can't reach out to them. I can't lean on them anymore. They're no longer my emergency contact. I gotta be that for myself, or I gotta find it elsewhere. And I think the biggest thing with being in contact or still checking up on them on social media is you're essentially allowing another person to control how you feel. Because the more you talk and the more that you're looking at what they're doing, the more that you're inviting potential triggers to be seen, to be heard, to be red for you to get butthurt. Because what if you see an Instagram story and they happen to be with a girl? You're gonna start spiraling, you're gonna start overthinking about certain things, you're gonna start painting pictures that aren't real in your head. Versus if you never see those things, if you're never talking to them, the only thing that's going to trigger you are things that you think up in your mind, which is albeit very scary, but at least you can work through those things and you're not hyper fixating on external signals that you are inviting into your mind. And like I said before, this is not my first breakup, so I've definitely done it where I've stayed in contact. That's a whole other story time for another video. And there are times where I've gone cold turkey, and the cold turkey is the better option. Listen to me. The second tip for getting through a breakup is kind of related. You're essentially cutting off your go-to person cold turkey, and therefore you need a new go-to person, and that best person is yourself. How do you become that person, you ask? Well, let me tell you. I think the biggest role that a good partner would play is that they fulfill a plethora of your needs. So essentially what you need to start doing is building trust within yourself that you can fulfill your own needs. And while it is kind of easier said than done, there are also very small steps that you can do to start building that foundation. For example, let's say you have a day where you're feeling down bad about your breakup. You don't want to go out even though you've made plans. You just want to stay home, watch a good movie, and then go to sleep early. As your fulfiller of your own needs, you're going to be like, I got you. I'm going to cancel those plans so that I can stay home, have a bath, go to sleep early. Essentially what you're doing is allowing yourself to do what you want to do and taking that control back. Obviously, this can be a slippery slope because on one hand, you don't want to let yourself fall into a deep, deep pit of despair, but it is a form of self-care to be gentle with yourself and to allow yourself to go through the motions of healing and feeling the breakup. Another example of this from when I was going through this is I really missed those romantic date nights, the dinners, those cute little gestures that really showed that I was loved. And so I literally did it to myself. The Valentine's Day after we broke up was the first Valentine's Day I had spent alone in many years. Excuse me, sirens, please, quiet on set. So rude, sorry if you can hear that. And so that Valentine's Day, I literally made myself the most gourmet meal. I dressed up, I looked so cute. I set the dining table all nice with little candles. I watched my favorite movie. I had the best, most romantic night, and it was literally just me. I still remember that night as such a pinnacle healing moment that I could still feel giddy and joy without another person being there. Like, and then my third tip for getting through a breakup is exactly that. You have to go through. There's no getting over it. When I think of getting over it, I think of someone being like, okay, get over it. You can't talk about it anymore. Don't think about it anymore. The problem with not thinking about it anymore is it is virtually impossible to not think about the thing that you're told not to think about. It's like that thing people always say, if you try not to think about an elephant, the first thing you think about is an elephant. So if you're trying not to think about how down bad you feel or how lonely you feel, what are you gonna think about? How sad and how lonely you are. I think it's so important to just feel everything that you need to feel, even though it's really sad and really uncomfortable and you don't want to be the person that's just like sobbing in their bed every other day. You need to be doing those things. Otherwise, you're just going to do all those things later and it's going to be even weirder for you to do it later. Sob when you need to sob. Talk about it when you need to talk about it. Your true friends will listen to you no matter what. That's the only way you're gonna get through it and come out on the other side a fully healed version of yourself. Please don't forget that the healing process is not linear. There will be so many things that trigger new emotions for you as you continue living without that person. And I almost feel like there are more triggers the longer you've been with that person because there will be so many little nuanced reminders that have been implanted into your mind. The best way to look at it is the more that you are having those moments of being like, wow, I miss them, wow, that reminded me of them, the more that you are cycling through all of those little triggers and the faster you can get to the end where you've exhausted them all, that they no longer bother you. Like I said at the beginning of this video, it's been 2 years since that breakup. I have so much more to catch you up on. I had a big year after that breakup and I'm now in another relationship. So make sure you're subscribed and turn on your notifications because while I can commit to more videos, I can't necessarily commit to a posting schedule. I'll also make sure to post on my Instagram stories as soon as a new video comes out. So if you're not following me there, make sure to go follow me so you know when episode 2 of this long saga comes out. I'm so excited to be back here with you guys. It feels so good to sit here and exercise my vocal cords. Please feel free to share your breakup stories, your relationship stories down below, and any tips you might have for healing after a breakup, because I would love to hear your thoughts. I'll see you in the next debrief. Love you. Mwah!